This tutorial is about how to use filters and masks in TerrainComposer. Let's get started with creating a terrain. I create a scene parent, I choose the Terrains2 folder to save to, and then I click Create Terrain. Now for this I'm going to use a height map layer, so I click plus here to add the height map layer, and height output is active. And TerrainComposer works a little bit like Photoshop. You have like different layers, and in each layer you can have multiple filters, and each filter can have multiple masks. The way TerrainComposer processes everything while generating is like it loops through the layers from top to bottom, and inside the layer it's the same. It loops through all the filters from top to bottom, and also in each filter then the masks from top to bottom. And the filters are combined, and the way they are combined to a total value you can set in output. You can add filter values to each other, you can do subtract, change, and all these different options you have in the output. So I'm going to show now how this works, and for that we're going to use two shapes. I created two height maps in Photoshop, a square and a circle. I saved the height map as a 16-bit raw grayscale image. TerrainComposer can import that format. In each filter and mask you have an input and an output, and there's different inputs you can choose from. And now it's on always, and what always does, and if we click shift click generate, we have auto generate, and we can see immediately what it does. And always is choosing the value that is over here for the filter, and there is height, steepness, direction. Those you can use after you generated the height map, and direction is the normal of the terrain. For example, random, you can see what that does. But now we're going to use the raw height map import. So I select that, and then open the square in here, and you can see what that does. And then with strength you can make it less high. Then there is the settings over here, and let's make the window a little bit bigger. You can change the offset, the scale. If you enable the toggle, the X and the Y are connected to each other, and if you change the scale you also have to change the offset. But let's reset those, and 0, and you can even rotate every height map. Okay, now let's duplicate this filter. I shift click plus, and then we're going to load the circle. Now you can see what happens. So this generates a filter output, and that's what we see over here, and this is added to the filter total. And now here in the second filter we have it on add. The circle is added to the total filter value. Now you can also choose subtract, and it will be subtracted. And change. And change works like an overlay. So if I put the strength to 0, it is filter 0 that is showing. And if I put the strength to 1, it is only filter 1 that is showing. And in between, it's like a transition from 0 to filter 1. Okay, and then we have multiply, and that will multiply the filter total by this filter. And if you look at Photoshop, because this is black, and if you multiply by 0 it will be flat. And then we have divide, which divides, and then difference. Difference works a bit similar to subtract, only it takes filter 0, subtract filter 1, and then take the absolute value of that. So if I duplicate this filter you can see the difference. And if you would have it on subtract, it would be even deeper. I'll delete this one again. And there is average. The average takes filter 1 value and divides it by the total amount of filters. So if I would add more filters, you can see that it's getting lower. Delete them again. If I want the average of everything, I would have to select average here as well. And now this also gets divided by 2. And then there is a max. And what max does is comparing filter 0 with filter 1. And the maximum value between the two is chosen. So if I would scroll this to the left, you can see the difference with add. There's also minimum, which does the opposite. It also compares the two, and then the minimum value is chosen. Now it all works in a way that is from top to bottom. So if I would add another filter, and I put this one on max, then the max is chosen between the total filter value and then filter 2. Okay, now let's look how masks work. So I delete these two filters. I'm going to open the island height map, which is included in the examples. So here it is. And we're going to add a mask in here. And now we're going to load the square in here. And now you can see what the mask is doing. And we can take a look in Photoshop. The black part will be ignored and the white part will be drawn. And if we zoom in, we see on the edges it's going from white to black, and that then is the fall off. So you can see on the edges there's a fall off. We can duplicate the mask, shift click plus, and then on output it's on max. Then if I would change the offset in here, and there's again different things you can choose from, like minimum, only the overlapping parts will be visible then, the average, add and subtract. And this works the same way, so you can keep duplicating, adding other masks. Now let's take a look at what inputs we have. For that we're going to delete the masks here, so I Ctrl Shift click minus to delete them all. Then we can generate in a higher resolution. So in size I want to make it a little bit higher, so I select 500, or I could just put this one to 1. Nah, that is actually high enough. So I shift click get to get the old value in here again. Click on resolutions and put this one on 1025. Shift click set. Now it's on auto generate. And actually we can even put it a little bit lower, I think. So I put this to 200. Yes. And in settings I put the pixel area to 1, so we see all the resolution. And now we're going to make a splat layer, so I click splat output, click plus here, and then we need to assign splat textures, so I click on splat textures here. Then I open the included examples, I shift click set. Now let's take a look in the splat layer, and for it we're going to use two very distinct splat textures. And now it's on hide the input. And in the splat layer, and this also works in the tree, in the grass and object layer, you can use the sliders over here, and if the screen is too small they will not be visible, so you will have to make the TerrainComposer window a little bit wider. You can select more of one and less of the other, and then C is the average, so we want more grass. And the reason now you see that the grass is over here, because our terrain is not 1 at the top. If we measure the top over here, it's at 0.7. and we can click calculate here to calculate the maximum height. Yeah, it's around 0.7. So the filter is selecting which splat texture to draw. So if the filter output is 0 and in between 0 and 0.5, the dirt texture is chosen, and if the splat output is 0.5 or 1, the grass texture is chosen. So to get an average, it should be on 0.35, and then it is around the middle. Then with the mix rate you can set the fall off. But now it is on height, and we can also choose steepness, and then it's choosing the angle. And we can add some more splat textures like this one, and then a cliff. We can choose direction as an input, and that's the terrain normals. So if I would change something here, it is only changing terrain, everything that's facing the left side. And that's what you can do with all these curves. This is the right side, the front, the back, and this is the Y. And then there is an image we can read from, or random. But an image, we can take a look and select an image to draw from. Let's see if we have something in here. We can use this noise, and then add a color range. So the image is white. So we select everything between black and white, and then for the white the cliff is chosen, and for the black the dirt is chosen. And we can influence it with this curve. So if I put this one higher, you can see what happens. I will explain curves later with the height map of this terrain. But first let's take a look at more inputs. There is random range, and what random range is doing, and this is very handy in masks. For every resolution pixel that is generated, TerrainComposer takes a random value between 0 and 1000. So if I put this to 100, it selects 1 in the 10 times, because then it's a tenth of 1000, and if I do in the range 0 and 1000, it will be always random. And like 0, 500, that's the half. And it's very handy for placement without overlap. Then there is always, and I already showed it in the height map layer how it works. So we can change the position over here. Now the filter output is 0.1, and it's in between here, so it chooses the dirt texture. And now it's 0.35, so it chooses in between here, and that's the grass texture. And we could have influence on this with this slider, of course. Now the value is between 0, and we can see now it's choosing in between these two. Then there is current, but I will explain it later in the height map layer. Max count will put only a number of times, like you can give in how much times you want to give an output. This is useful in masks, like if you want to place trees and you only want to place 10 trees, you put like 10 in there and it will not exceed 10 trees. We can do the raw height map, which I already showed. Then we can read a splat map. We can use that for trees. I can quickly show that. And we can do raycasting. So let's move over and create a tree layer now. So I add some trees here. The example, shift click set. I activate tree output and add a tree. Now let's make quickly a nice splat map. So I add more textures in here, and then shift click plus to get this numbering. Okay, and then we do input on height, and then I duplicate the filter, shift click plus, and now they're actually overlapping, which we don't want. What in splat layers, each filter will draw on the terrain, and then you can get too much splat total in here, because it should be always 1. What we can do in splat filters is combine these filter values and now only in the last filter it will do the output to the splat map. So if I select steepness over here, we can combine these two. So this splat total is taken. For example, this is 0.5. Then it moves over to filter 1, and this, for example, is then 0.2. Then 0.7 is chosen, and then it will draw this texture. But if combine is off, then it is 0.5, it draws this texture on that location, and in this one 0.2, and it will draw this texture, or this one on top. So that's what you see here. So we choose combine. Yeah, we want to use more cliff. Maybe less of those two. Make it more deserty. Okay, like this. So let's create a little bit sphere in it. And I click help, then the example window. I create the lighting. Then we also have directional light and everything in it. Now let's go to the tree layer. Now I add a tree. Oh, now auto generate is on. Okay, now let's use a mask for this, because we're looking at inputs. And now we can use this splat map as an input. And I can say, like, I only want to place trees on the grass texture. Now if I click generate, it will only place trees and then way too much. So let's reduce the layer strength over here. Auto generate on again. Yeah, like this. So now it only places trees on the grass texture. I can duplicate, shift click plus, and choose a second texture over here. And it already did that. And now it's also placing trees on the forest texture. For the splat map you have to place this in the top. We can add more rules, like shift click plus, and then I say I want to exclude a certain height. Then I put this one on height, the inputs. Now on flat level there will be placed no trees, and on the height 1 it will place trees, but we want to invert it. And then we can drag this one to the left to exclude height here. And now we are still on max, so the maximum value is chosen, but we want this on minimum, so these two filters then are also taken into account. Now you can see that it is way too low. And this is how you can combine rules in TerrainComposer. And if we want to exclude a certain steepness, we click shift click plus, then choose steepness over here, and then we can get only the flat angles here. You see what happens. Now let's move over to doing curves. You can deviate the input with a curve. So let's just activate it, put it on normal. The input is evaluated through the curve, and we can click the help button to see what it does. So here we have our input that is on the raw height map. So it reads from the height map. We get, for example, value 0.2, and then the curve is evaluated at 0.2. And this is of course now, because the line is just linear straight, the output value is also 0.2, but we can also select another curve, and now the new value will be this value, which is much lower. You can see the immediate results here in the scene. If it shows different curves, what happens. We can invert it. And then you can really play with this and do all kinds of stuff with the curves. Curves can be very handy to mix height maps together, mix splat layers together, and I can quickly show that in splat layers. So we can deactivate this one, get a normal output, go to a splat layer. Say we have this setup, I generate it. We quickly delete some here to make it very visible what we're doing. So we have like grass here, and we want to use a mask for this. Now we can add a mask over here, and we do that on height. So then we can also use the curve, and I actually want to select the opposite. We want to exclude the higher part, so I drag this one to the left, create another curve key in here, put it over here, and then select all curves, and I set the tangents to linear to get a nice fall off. You can see how useful using curves is. So I would select more, and now we can fill this part with another layer. So I add another layer, and now we want to put cliff textures in there. So now it's totally looking wrong, but it will look right soon. I duplicate the mask in here, and we can we have this on height. We alt click plus, and then we only need to invert this curve line to completely get the opposite, and we get a perfect mix between the two. These were the basics how layers, filters, masks and curves work in TerrainComposer. Now it might be a little bit overwhelming, but I encourage you to play with it and to learn it, and once you know it, you can use it for every output. And that's the great thing, you only have to learn it once, and as soon as you get your grip on it, you will see the use of the whole system, and you will be able to generate results very fast. Thank you very much for watching.